The dust-choked road stretched endless under the merciless Wyoming sun, and Eliza Ward knew she was dying. Not from illness, from exhaustion, from shame, from the crushing weight of 9 hungry mouths she could no longer feed. Her 6-year-old daughter's whisper cut deeper than any blade. "Mama, nobody wants us, 'cause we're too many." Eliza's vision blurred. Her knees buckled. This was the end, until hoofbeats thundered behind them, and a stranger's shadow fell across their broken path. What happened next would shatter everything she believed about mercy, love, and whether a family like hers deserved a second chance. Before we continue, please drop a comment with your city or country so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The September wind carried no mercy across the Wyoming plains, only dust and the hollow promise of rain that never came. Eliza Ward's boots, worn through at the heels, held together by strips of cloth she'd torn from her own petticoat, scraped against the hardpan road with each agonizing step. Behind her, 9 children moved like ghosts, silent, sunburned, their eyes too old for their faces. She didn't need to turn around to know their conditions. She felt it in her bones, in the terrible mathematics of motherhood. 9 bodies, 1 canteen of brackish water, no food since yesterday's breakfast of boiled grass and hope. Nora, age 6, clung to 8-year-old Samuel's hand. Behind them, 10-year-old Evan carried 3-year-old Timothy on his back, the child's breathing shallow and hot with fever. The twins, Margaret and Martha, age 12, supported 13-year-old Rebecca between them, her ankles still swollen from when she'd twisted it 3 days back. 14-year-old James walked at the rear with 15-year-old Daniel, both boys moving with the grim determination of soldiers who knew the battle was already lost. And at the front, cradled against Eliza's chest in a sling made from her shawl, 7-month-old baby Ruth whimpered, a thin, reedy sound that broke Eliza's heart with each breath. 5 months. It had been 5 months since the land dispute that took her husband's life. 5 months since William Ward had ridden out to confront the cattle baron's men about fences torn down, water rights violated, livestock poisoned. He'd gone seeking justice and come back draped over his horse, a bullet through his chest, and not a damn lawman willing to investigate. The ranch, 60 acres of hard-won grassland William's father had homesteaded, had been seized within weeks. Outstanding debts, they'd claimed, though William had kept meticulous records proving otherwise. Records that mysteriously vanished when the land office burned down 3 days after his death. Convenient, coincidental, criminal. But who cared about the rights of a widow with 9 children? The town of Blackwater Ridge had made their position clear. Eliza could still hear Mrs. Thornton's voice, dripping with false sympathy. "We simply don't have the resources, Mrs. Ward. 9 children. Perhaps if you'd been more, prudent in your family planning." The church had offered prayers but no shelter. The bank had offered sympathy but no credit. The neighbors had offered advice. Send the children to the orphanage. They'll be better off separated into families that can actually care for them. Separate her children. Split apart the only thing left in this world that mattered, over her dead body. So Eliza had packed what little they could carry, loaded the children into their rickety wagon, and left Blackwater Ridge before dawn, before anyone could try to take her babies by force. She'd heard of work in Laramie, a garment factory that hired widows, a boarding house that might take them in. It was 60 miles northeast, across open country, with a wagon held together by rust and prayer. The wagon had made it 37 miles before the axle snapped. That was 2 days ago. Now they walked because there was nothing else to do. Walk or die. And Eliza Ward was too stubborn to die while her children still breathed. "Mama?" Nora's voice was so small, so brittle. "Mama, I'm thirsty." Eliza's throat convulsed. The canteen had been empty since noon. The sun was a hammer, the sky an anvil, and they were being beaten between the two. "I know, sweetheart," she managed, her voice cracked and raw. "There's a creek marked on the map, just a few more miles. You said that hours ago." Daniel's voice held no accusation, just exhaustion. At 15, he'd become the man of the family by default, and the weight was crushing him. "Mama, we need to stop. The little ones can't go on." "We can't stop in the open." Eliza forced her legs to keep moving, even as her vision swam. There's no shelter, no water. We have to reach. Reach what? James appeared at her elbow, his face gaunt and dusty. Mama, there's nothing out here, just more road and more dust, and there's a town. Eliza pulled the folded map from her pocket with trembling hands. The paper was worn soft as cloth from her constant checking. Mercy Creek. It's marked right here, maybe 5 miles north. We can make it before dark, find help. The last 3 towns closed their doors on us. Daniel's voice was flat, dead. Why would this one be different? Because it has to be. Because I don't know what else to do. Because if we don't find help soon, I'm going to watch my children die one by one, and that will kill me faster than any bullet. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she folded the map with careful precision and tucked it away. This one will be different, she said, and forced iron into her spine. Come on, let's keep moving. They walked. The sun crawled across the sky like it had all the time in the world. Eliza counted her children every few minutes, compulsively, terrified that one would simply fold up and disappear into the dust. 9. Still 9. Thank God, still 9. Baby Ruth's whimpers grew weaker, more infrequent. That scared Eliza more than crying would have. She adjusted the sling, pressed her lips to Ruth's forehead. Too hot. The baby needed water, needed food, needed things Eliza couldn't provide. Mama, I can't. Margaret stumbled, and Martha grabbed her twin's arm, both girls swaying. We're stopping. Daniel's voice brooked no argument. Mama, we're stopping right now, or someone's going to collapse. He was right. Eliza knew he was right, but the sun was still high. They were exposed on open road, and stopping meant admitting they were beaten. There, Rebecca pointed with a shaking hand toward a cluster of cottonwood trees about 100 yards off the road. Shade, at least. It took them 20 minutes to cover that 100 yards. By the time they reached the trees, Eliza's legs were shaking so badly she had to lean against a trunk to stay upright. The children collapsed in the sparse shade like puppets with cut strings. Eliza made herself check each one. Timothy was burning with fever, his lips cracked and bleeding. The twins were pale as ghosts. Nora had curled into a ball, making herself as small as possible, as if she could disappear entirely. Samuel's hands shook when he tried to pat her back. Daniel, James, come with me. Eliza forced herself upright. We'll scout ahead, see if there's water. Mama, you can barely stand. Daniel's voice cracked. Just rest, please. Just for an hour. An hour? What would an hour cost? The baby's life? Timothy's? How did she calculate the value of rest against the value of time? Eliza looked at her oldest son and saw terror hiding behind exhaustion. He was 15 years old and he thought his mother was going to die. He was probably right. 1 hour, she whispered, and let herself sink down against the cottonwood trunk. Ruth stirred in the sling, and Eliza rocked her gently, uselessly, mother's instinct with nothing behind it but love and air. The shade was a blessing, but it couldn't erase their thirst or fill their bellies. It couldn't change the fact that they were stranded in the middle of nowhere with no help coming and no miracles left. Eliza closed her eyes just for a moment, and behind her eyelids she saw William, strong and laughing, lifting Nora onto his shoulders while the older boys chased each other around the yard, and she stirred a pot of stew that actually had meat in it. A lifetime ago. A different world. I'm sorry, she whispered to his ghost. I tried. God help me, I tried. Mama? Nora's small voice pulled her back. Mama, are we going to die? Every parent's nightmare distilled into 4 simple words from a 6-year-old's mouth. Eliza opened her eyes and looked at her daughter, dirty, sunburned, hopeful despite everything because children always believed their mothers could fix anything. No, baby. Eliza pulled Nora close, pressed a kiss to her dusty hair. No, we're not going to die. We're going to rest here a bit, then we'll keep walking and we'll find help. I promise. Promises made in desperation were lies dressed up in a mother's love. But what else could she offer? Nora nestled against her side. The ladies in town said nobody would want us because we're too many kids. Is that true? Eliza's heart cracked clean in half. She hadn't realized Nora had heard that conversation with Mrs. Thornton. How much else had her children overheard? How many other casual cruelties had they absorbed? Those ladies were wrong, Eliza said fiercely. They were wrong and small-minded but Mama, maybe they're right. Nora's voice was so serious, so small. Maybe 9 kids is too many. Maybe if there were less of us, someone would help. Nora Elizabeth Ward, you listen to me. Eliza gripped her daughter's thin shoulders, forcing eye contact. Every single one of you is wanted. Every single one of you is loved. And anyone who thinks 9 is too many isn't worthy of knowing even one of you. Do you understand? Nora's lower lip trembled. Yes, Mama. But her eyes said she didn't believe it, and that broke Eliza's heart all over again. The hour passed like a held breath. Eliza dozed without meaning to, jerking awake every few minutes in a panic, counting children compulsively. 9. Still 9. Not dead yet. Keep going. Daniel was the one who shook her fully awake as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. Mama, we need to move. Eliza nodded, levered herself upright with her spine screaming in protest. Baby Ruth had gone completely silent in the sling. When Eliza touched her forehead, the baby's skin was papery and hot. Timothy's fever is worse, Rebecca reported quietly. And Mama, I don't think the twins can walk much farther. Eliza looked at her ragged band of children and did the brutal math. They couldn't stay here. No water, no food, no shelter. They couldn't send scouts ahead. She wouldn't risk splitting the family. They had to move together, or not at all. We walk, she said. Slow if we have to, but we walk. That town has to be close. It has to be. It wasn't faith. It was the only option that didn't involve giving up. And Eliza Ward had never learned how to surrender. They hauled themselves onto the road like soldiers returning from a lost battle. The sun hung lower now, painting the western sky the color of blood and gold. Beautiful, if you had the energy to notice. Deadly, if you understood what sunset meant. Darkness, cold, predators, and the absolute certainty that they couldn't survive a night in the open. They walked. Eliza counted steps instead of miles. 1 step, 2 steps, 20, 50, 100. Count the steps and don't think about the children stumbling behind you. Don't think about the baby's silence. Don't think about how your own legs are shaking, how your vision keeps narrowing to a tunnel, how your heartbeat feels irregular and strange. Just walk. The road stretched on, exactly the same in every direction. Dust and scrub brush and endless sky, and Eliza began to understand that the map had lied, that Mercy Creek was a fiction, that they were going to die on this road and their bones would bleach in the sun and no one would even know to look for them. Mama! Samuel's voice was urgent. Mama, someone's coming! Eliza's head snapped up. In the distance, she could see it. A rider, moving fast, a plume of dust rising behind the horse. Hope and terror warred in her chest. A rider meant another person, meant potential help, but it also meant a stranger, meant possible danger, meant someone who would see a desperate widow with 9 starving children and make calculations about whether helping was worth the cost. Stay together, Eliza ordered. The children clustered close, and she shifted Ruth's sling, trying to make her baby look less like a dying child and more like a normal infant. Trying to make them all look less pathetic, less burdensome, less like the human catastrophe they'd become. The rider grew closer. Male, Eliza noted. Tall in the saddle, broad shoulders, dark hat pulled low. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who belonged in this landscape, who'd never had to count steps to stay alive. As he approached, Eliza forced her spine straight, forced her chin up, tried to summon dignity from the wreckage of her pride. She stepped slightly forward, positioning herself between the stranger and her children, a mother's instinct, utterly useless against a man on horseback but impossible to suppress. The rider slowed as he neared them, his horse dancing sideways, nostrils flaring at the scent of their desperation. The man himself was maybe 35, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen their share of storms. His clothes were work-worn but clean, his horse well cared for, everything about him speaking of competence and capability, everything Eliza lacked. Those storm-gray eyes swept over her, over the children, missing nothing. Eliza watched his expression, waiting for the pity, the disgust, the judgment. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like recognition, as if he'd seen this scene before. "Ma'am." He touched the brim of his hat, voice low and even. "You folks look like you could use some help." It was the kindness in his tone that nearly broke her. Eliza had armored herself against cruelty, against rejection, but gentleness slipped right through her defenses. "We're fine." The lie was automatic, ridiculous. "Just heading to Mercy Creek, not far now." The rider, rancher, she amended, noting the rope coiled at his saddle, the work-roughened hands, studied her for a long moment. "Mercy Creek's been a ghost town for 3 years, ma'am. Nothing there but empty buildings and rattlesnakes." The words hit like a physical blow. Empty. The town was empty. The map had lied, or was outdated, and there was no help waiting, no salvation, just more dust and death, and Eliza's knees buckled. She didn't mean to fall. She commanded her legs to hold, ordered her body to stay upright, but 5 days of walking on empty and the death of hope was too much. She staggered, vision graying at the edges. "Mama!" Daniel's shout seemed to come from very far away. Then strong hands caught her arms, held her upright, and the rancher's voice was urgent. "Easy now. When's the last time you ate?" "I'm fine." Eliza tried to push away, but her muscles wouldn't obey. The children need their mother conscious." The rancher shifted his grip, supporting more of her weight. "And you're about 30 seconds from passing out." He was right. The world was tilting, her heartbeat thready and strange. She'd pushed too far, run too long on nothing, and her body was finally demanding payment. "Daniel," the rancher's voice carried authority. "You're the oldest?" "Yes, sir." Daniel stepped forward, terrified but trying to hide it. "How long since you all ate? Truth now." "Yesterday morning." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "Some grass boiled in water. Before that, I don't remember." The rancher's jaw tightened. He looked back at Eliza, at the baby silent in the sling, at the 8 other children swaying in the road. "My ranch is 3 miles west," he said. "I've got food, water, shelter. You're all coming with me." "We can't—" Eliza tried to find words. "We don't have money. We can't pay you for—" "Did I ask for payment?" The rancher's tone was gentle but firm. "Ma'am, you've got 9 kids about to collapse, and you're not far behind. This isn't a negotiation." "Why?" The word tore from Eliza's throat. "Why would you help us? You don't even know us. We're nothing but—" "Trouble?" The rancher's mouth quirked, something sad and knowing in his expression. "Maybe so. But trouble or not, I'm not leaving children to die on the road." Nora, small and brave and breaking Eliza's heart, stepped forward. She looked up at the rancher with her mother's eyes, haunted, exhausted, far too old. "Nobody wants my mama because she has too many kids," Nora said, her voice carrying the weight of every rejection they'd faced. "That's what the town ladies said. 9 is too many." The rancher crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with this tiny, fierce girl. When he spoke, his voice carried a conviction that made Eliza's breath catch. "Good," he said simply. "I want all of you." The silence that followed was absolute. Eliza stared at this stranger who'd appeared from nowhere, who'd heard the worst truth about them and responded with the most impossible words. All of them. He wanted all of them. "I don't understand," Eliza whispered. The rancher stood, looked at her with those storm-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through to her shattered core. "Don't need to understand right now, ma'am. Just need to accept help when it's offered." He gestured to his horse. "The little ones can ride. The older kids and I will walk alongside. It's 3 miles, rough country, but we'll manage." "I don't even know your name." Eliza's voice was shaking. "Cade Mercer." He touched his hat again. "And you are?" "Eliza Ward." She shifted Ruth's sling. "These are my children. Daniel, James, Rebecca, the twins Margaret and Martha, Evan, Samuel, Nora, Timothy, and baby Ruth." Cade nodded to each child as they were named, as if committing them to memory. "Pleased to meet you all. Now, let's get you somewhere safe before full dark." He moved with efficiency born of experience, lifting Timothy and Nora onto the horse, securing them carefully. The older children gathered close, and when Cade started walking west, leading the horse, they followed. Because what choice did they have? Because he'd offered help when no one else would? Because sometimes you had to trust the kindness of strangers when your own strength ran out? All of the above, Eliza thought, and fell into step beside him. Why? She asked again, needing to understand. We're nothing to you. Why would you take on... She gestured helplessly at her children, at the impossible burden of 9 extra mouths. All of this? Cade was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice carried old pain carefully banked. Lost someone once, he said. Someone who'd have wanted me to help folks when I could. He looked at her directly. So that's what I do. It wasn't an explanation, not really, but it was enough for now, enough to keep walking, enough to let hope, fragile, terrifying hope, kindle in her chest. They walked west as the sun bled out across the sky, and for the first time in months, Eliza Ward allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they might survive this after all. The ranch appeared on the horizon like a mirage, weathered wooden buildings silhouetted against the dying light, solid and real in a way that made Eliza's chest tighten with something dangerously close to relief. Cade's property wasn't grand or sprawling, but it had the quiet dignity of a place built by capable hands and maintained through sheer stubborn will. The main house stood 2 stories tall, its paint faded but its structure sound. A barn leaned slightly to the left, as if tired but refusing to fall. Corrals stretched out behind, empty now in the gathering dusk, and a windmill creaked rhythmically in the evening breeze. It was the most beautiful thing Eliza had seen in months. Almost there, Cade said quietly, and Timothy stirred on the horse, lifting his fevered head. The last quarter-mile felt longer than the previous 3 combined. Eliza's legs moved through pure force of will, her body beyond exhaustion into that strange, floating space where pain became abstract. Beside her, Daniel stumbled, caught himself, kept walking. Behind them, the twins leaned on each other, 2 halves of a whole barely managing to stay upright. They crossed through a gate. Cade held it open, counting heads as each child passed through, and into a yard that smelled of hay and horses and something cooking. Eliza's stomach clenched violently at that last scent, and she had to stop, breathing through her nose, willing herself not to collapse right there in sight of shelter. Rebecca, James, help your mother to the porch. Cade was already lifting Timothy down from the horse, the boy's small body limp as a rag doll. Daniel, bring the little ones inside. Front doors unlocked. They moved like sleepwalkers, the children climbing the porch steps with the slow deliberation of the very old or very young. The door swung open on well-oiled hinges and warm air spilled out, actual warmth from an actual fire, the kind of luxury they'd forgotten existed. The interior was sparse but clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, a long wooden table flanked by mismatched chairs, a kitchen area with a cast-iron stove still radiating heat, stairs leading up to what must be bedrooms. Everything neat, everything ordered, everything carrying the particular loneliness of a house kept by someone who lived alone. Sit, Cade instructed, and the children dropped into chairs like soldiers given permission to fall out. Nora crawled into Samuel's lap, both of them shaking with exhaustion. The twins slumped against each other. Evan simply laid his head on the table and closed his eyes. Eliza remained standing through sheer stubbornness, clutching Ruth's sling, swaying slightly. Her mind felt disconnected from her body, floating somewhere above the scene, unable to fully process that they were inside, that there was food cooking, that this stranger had actually brought them home. Ma'am, you need to sit before you fall. Cade's voice cut through the fog. He deposited Timothy on a settee near the fire and was already moving toward the stove. I've got stew. Made it this morning, so it's been simmering all day. Nothing fancy, but it's hot and there's plenty. We can't. Eliza's protest died as her knees gave out. James caught her elbow, guided her to a chair, and she sank into it gratefully, hating her weakness, grateful for it in equal measure. Can't what? Eat? Cade was ladling stew into bowls with practiced efficiency. Watch me stop you. He set the first bowl in front of Daniel. Slowly now. Your stomachs aren't used to real food, small bites, wait between them or you'll make yourselves sick. Daniel stared at the bowl like it might disappear. Chunks of beef, potatoes, carrots swimming in rich brown gravy. Real food. Actual meat. His hand shook as he picked up the spoon. Go on, Cade encouraged. All of you. There's more where that came from. It was like watching a dam break in slow motion. Daniel took one bite, then another, tears streaming down his face as he chewed. The twins received their bowls and ate in perfect synchronization, their eyes closed in something like prayer. Samuel tried to feed Nora first, but she pushed the spoon back toward his mouth. You first, you're bigger. And they compromised by taking turns. Cade moved through the room distributing bowls, his movements economical and sure. When he reached Eliza, he paused, studying her with those storm-gray eyes. The baby needs water first, he said. You have milk? Eliza's face burned with shame. Not enough. I've been trying, but without food, without water, I can't. Her voice cracked. She's barely nursing anymore. Cade nodded once, disappeared into the kitchen, returned with a clean cloth and a cup of water. We'll try this. Dip the cloth, let her suck on it, small amounts, frequent. If that doesn't work, I've got a neighbor with a milk cow. We can try that. He showed Eliza how to wet the cloth, how to let Ruth's tiny mouth close around the fabric. The baby stirred, whimpered, then began to suck weakly. It wasn't much, but it was something, and Eliza felt hot tears track down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. I don't know how to eat your stew. Cade set a bowl in front of her. Can't help the baby if you collapse. The stew was the best thing Eliza had ever tasted, and she knew objectively that it was probably just decent ranch cooking. But to a body running on empty, it might as well have been a feast prepared by angels. She forced herself to follow Cade's advice. Small bites, slow chewing, waiting between spoonfuls, even as her stomach screamed for more, faster, everything. Around the table, her children ate with the same desperate restraint. No one spoke. The only sounds were spoons against bowls, quiet chewing, the crackle of the fire, and Ruth's small sucking noises as she pulled water from the cloth. Cade refilled bowls without being asked, keeping portions modest, watching to make sure no one made themselves sick. When Evan reached for a third helping, Cade gently intercepted his hand. Give your stomach time to settle first, he said kindly. I promise there'll be breakfast in the morning. You won't go hungry here. Evan nodded, but his eyes were wary, like he'd heard promises before that turned to lies. After the meal, Cade cleared the bowls and set water to boil on the stove. There's a washroom through that door, he told Daniel. 3 at a time can wash up. You'll feel better for it, and I'll need to check the little one's fever. He gestured to Timothy, still lying listless on the settee. I can do it, Eliza protested, but Cade shook his head. You're barely upright yourself. Let me help. He crossed to Timothy, laid a hand on the boy's forehead, frowned. He's burning up. How long has he been sick? 3 days. Eliza felt guilt twist in her gut. I've been trying to keep him cool, but without water, without shade. You did what you could. Cade's tone was matter of fact, not absolving her, but not condemning either. He scooped Timothy up as if the 4-year-old weighed nothing. I've got willow bark tea and cool compresses. We'll get this fever down. He disappeared upstairs with Timothy cradled against his chest, and Eliza felt something in her chest crack open. This stranger carrying her sick child with the same gentle competence he'd shown in everything else. Asking for nothing, expecting nothing, just helping because it needed to be done. Daniel organized the washing rotation with military precision, sending the twins first, then Samuel and Nora, then Evan and James. Rebecca stayed with Eliza, hovering nervously, her 13-year-old face pinched with worry. Mama, is this real? She whispered. He's not going to... in the morning he won't... Won't what, sweetheart? Change his mind. Send us away. Tell us we're too much trouble. Rebecca twisted her hands in her skirt. Everyone else did. Eliza wanted to promise it would be different, but she'd learned the hard way that promises were just pretty lies dressed up in hope. I don't know, she admitted, but whatever happens, we're together. That's what matters. Rebecca didn't look convinced, but she nodded and went quiet. Cade reappeared after a while, his expression serious but not panicked. Fever's high but not dangerous yet. I've got him in cool compresses and he's sipping willow bark tea. He needs rest more than anything. He looked at Eliza. When's the last time any of them slept in an actual bed? 5 months. The words came out flat, exhausted. Since before we lost the ranch. Something shifted in Cade's expression, not pity, but understanding. There are 3 bedrooms upstairs, he said. The main room has a large bed that'll fit the littlest ones. Timothy, Nora, Samuel, the baby. Second room has 2 smaller beds for the older girls and boys. Third room, he paused. That's where I sleep, but tonight you'll take it. I'll bunk in the barn. Absolutely not. Eliza tried to stand, swayed, gripped the table edge. You've already done too much. We can sleep in the barn. Or, ma'am, with respect, you're in no condition to argue. Cade's voice was gentle but immovable. You need actual rest in an actual bed, and your children need to know you're safe and close. I've slept in that barn more times than I can count. It's got a stove, a cot, everything I need. This isn't negotiable. Why are you doing this? Eliza's voice broke on the question. We're strangers. We bring nothing but trouble and expense. 9 children to feed, house, care for. Do you understand what you've taken on? Cade was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant, focused on something only he could see. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief carefully managed. Had a wife once, he said softly. Sarah. Sweetest soul you'd ever meet, heart bigger than the whole territory. We were going to fill this house with children, with noise and life and love. He looked at Eliza directly. She died of fever 6 years ago, 3 months after our wedding. Took our unborn baby with her. The silence that followed was profound. Eliza felt tears burn behind her eyes, felt Rebecca's hand slip into hers. I'm sorry, Eliza whispered. I'm so sorry. Me too. Cade's smile was sad, self-deprecating. This house has been too quiet for too long. Sarah used to say that a home isn't about the building, it's about the people inside it. She'd have loved the chaos of 9 kids. He looked around at the children who'd gone silent, listening. So when I saw you all on that road, desperate and hungry and trying so hard to keep going, I thought about what Sarah would have wanted, and she'd have wanted me to help. So that's what I'm doing. We're not a charity project, Daniel said quietly, his young voice trying for dignity. We can work. We can earn our keep. I don't doubt it. Cade met the boy's eyes with respect. But tonight you're guests. Tomorrow we can talk about arrangements, about what comes next. Right now you all need sleep. He herded them upstairs with the same gentle firmness he'd shown at dinner, showing the boys to one room, the girls to another, settling the little ones in the main bedroom where Timothy already lay sleeping under cool compresses. Eliza followed in a daze, Ruth still clutched to her chest, her mind unable to fully process the softness of blankets, the clean smell of sheets, the impossible luxury of safety. The room Cade showed her to was simple but comfortable. A large bed with a quilt, a washstand with clean water, a window overlooking the darkened prairie. His room, Eliza realized, noting the few personal items. A photograph on the dresser showing a younger Cade and a beautiful woman with kind eyes. A pocket watch on the nightstand, boots lined up precisely by the door. Sarah, Cade said softly, seeing where Eliza's gaze had landed on the photograph. She'd have liked you, would have admired your strength, traveling alone with 9 children, refusing to give up. I'm not strong. Eliza's voice was hollow. I'm just too stubborn to die. That's the same thing in my experience. Cade moved toward the door. There's a bell pull by the bed if you need anything in the night. I'll be in the barn, but I'm a light sleeper. And ma'am, he paused in the doorway. You're safe here. All of you. Get some rest. He closed the door quietly, and Eliza stood in the center of the room, swaying slightly, Ruth warm against her chest. Safe. The word felt foreign, impossible, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. She laid Ruth in the center of the bed, surrounding her with pillows, then sank down beside her baby and let herself cry, great wrenching sobs that she'd been holding back for 5 months. For every mile walked and every door slammed in her face, and every night spent wondering if morning would find her children dead from hunger, or cold, or her own failures as a mother. She cried until there was nothing left, until exhaustion pulled her down into sleep still wearing her dusty clothes, still clutching her baby close, still half convinced she'd wake to find this was all a fever dream and they were still on that road, still dying, still alone. But when morning light filtered through the window, she was still in the soft bed. Ruth was stirring beside her, making small, hungry noises. And from downstairs came the smell of coffee and frying bacon and the low murmur of Cade's voice talking with her children. Real. This was real. Eliza sat up slowly, her body aching in new ways. The ache of muscles finally allowed to rest, of a stomach given food after too long empty. She changed Ruth's diaper using a clean cloth she found in the washstand drawer, then made her way downstairs on trembling legs. The kitchen was organized chaos. Cade stood at the stove managing 3 pans simultaneously while Daniel set the table and Rebecca sliced bread. The other children were already seated, scrubbed clean, wearing clothes that weren't their own, too big on the smaller ones, but clean and whole, without holes or tears. "You raided your own wardrobe," Eliza said from the doorway, and Cade glanced over his shoulder. "Morning. And yes, figured real clothes beat road dust. They'll need proper fitting later, but this works for now." He slid eggs onto plates with practiced ease. "How's the baby?" "Hungry?" Eliza felt self-conscious, standing there in her filthy dress while everyone else looked almost human again. "I need to feed her, but you need food first." Cade pointed to an empty chair. "Sit, eat. Your daughter can wait 10 minutes. It went against every maternal instinct, but Eliza knew he was right. She sat, accepted the plate of eggs and bacon and fried potatoes he placed before her, and ate while Ruth fussed in her arms. The children chattered quietly, more animated than she'd seen them in months, and Eliza realized with a start that they were relaxed. Actually relaxed, without the constant tension of survival riding their shoulders. After breakfast, she retreated to feed Ruth in private, and when she emerged, Cade had organized the children into work details with the efficiency of a general deploying troops. "Daniel, James, you're with me checking fence lines. Rebecca, Margaret, Martha, if you're willing, the chicken coop could use mucking and the vegetable garden is more weeds than vegetables. Evan, Samuel, you two are on water duty. All the troughs need filling. And Nora," he crouched down to her level. "Think you can keep an eye on Timothy today? Make sure he drinks his willow bark tea?" Nora nodded solemnly, thrilled to be given responsibility. "Wait," Eliza stepped forward. "Mr. Mercer, this is too much. We can't just take over your home, put your children to work." "They're not working, they're helping. There's a difference." Cade straightened, met her eyes calmly. "And while they're busy, you and I are going to have a conversation about what happens next." "Fair?" It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. She was imposing on his generosity, disrupting his life, taking advantage of his kindness. But she also didn't have the strength to refuse, not when her children finally looked like children again instead of starving refugees. "Fair," she whispered. The children scattered to their assigned tasks with an enthusiasm that made Eliza's throat tight. Cade poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one, and gestured to the porch. They sat in rocking chairs that overlooked the prairie, the morning sun warming the weathered wood, and for a long moment neither spoke. Eliza sipped her coffee, real coffee, strong and hot, and tried to organize her thoughts into something coherent. "I need to be honest with you," she finally said. "We have nothing, no money, no property, no prospects. My husband was killed in a land dispute, and the men responsible took everything we owned. I've been trying to reach Laramie, find work, find somewhere to settle, but—" She gestured helplessly. 9 children. No one wants that burden." "So you've said." Cade's voice was mild. "And I've said I want all of you. So where does that leave us?" "I don't understand what you expect in return." Eliza set her coffee cup down with a sharp click. "No one helps without expecting something. What is it you want? Because if you think I'm going to trade myself for shelter, if you think—" "Stop." Cade's voice was sharp enough to cut through her rising panic. "Ma'am, I'm going to say this once clearly. I don't expect anything inappropriate from you or anyone else. What I'm offering is straightforward. Room, board, safety, for you and your children while you figure out your next steps. That's it. There's no such thing as charity without strings attached. Then call it something else." Cade leaned back in his rocker, his expression thoughtful. "Call it hiring help. I run this ranch alone and it's too much for one man. Your older boys are strong. They can help with livestock, mending fence, all the work that's been piling up. Your older girls clearly know their way around a household. You yourself. He gestured at the house behind them. This place hasn't seen a woman's touch in 6 years. It could use it. So we work as hired hands. Eliza tried to wrap her mind around it. For room and board. And a wage. Cade named a figure that made Eliza's eyes widen. Split however you see fit among the older children who work. The little ones are just children. They don't owe me labor. They owe me nothing except to be kids, which they haven't been able to do in too long. It was too generous. Too much. Too good to be true. Why? Eliza asked again. The truth this time. Not grief over your wife, not just kindness. Why would you tie yourself to a widow and 9 children? Will be nothing but a complication in your life. Cade was quiet for so long Eliza thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost hesitant. You asked about Sarah, he said. About what she'd have wanted. Truth is, after she died, I wanted to die too. This ranch, this house, it all felt like a tomb. I went through the motions, worked myself half to death trying not to feel anything. He looked out at the prairie. Then about a year ago, I was in town and saw a woman getting thrown out of the general store with her kids. 3 little ones all crying, Mama trying to keep her dignity while the shopkeeper called her trash for not being able to pay her tab. Eliza felt her chest tighten, recognizing the story. I paid her tab, Cade continued. Bought her groceries. She cried, thanked me, promised to repay me. I never saw her again, heard later she'd moved to her sister's place in Denver. He turned to look at Eliza directly. But for the first time since Sarah died, I felt something other than emptiness. Felt like maybe I could still do something good in this world, even if I couldn't save the person I loved most. So we're... what? A replacement for your grief? No. Cade's voice was firm. You're people who need help, and I'm someone who can provide it. That's all. No hidden motives, no expectations beyond honest work for fair compensation. And if that's not enough, if you still can't trust it, he stood, looked down at her. Then stay a few days, rest, get your strength back, and I'll take you to Laramie myself. No strings, no debt. Your choice. He walked back inside, leaving Eliza alone on the porch with her coffee and her spinning thoughts. The sound of children's laughter drifted from the garden, her girls, working in the soil, giggling over something. From the barn came Daniel's voice, calling to his younger brother. Normal sounds, happy sounds, the sounds of a childhood she'd thought lost forever. Eliza closed her eyes and felt tears slide down her cheeks again. But these were different. Not despair this time. Not quite hope either. Something in between. The fragile recognition that maybe, just maybe, they'd stumbled onto something rare. A good man with a lonely house, and a widow with too many children, both trying to figure out how to keep living after loss tried to destroy them. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't romance. It was something more practical and more precious. Survival through mutual need, generosity born of grief, and the possibility that broken things could be useful to each other. The day unfolded with surprising ease. The children worked without complaint, taking pride in their tasks, responding to Cade's quiet instructions with the eagerness of kids desperate to prove their worth. Eliza found herself drawn into the rhythm of the household, washing clothes, organizing the kitchen, discovering where Cade kept things, and silently noting what needed mending or replacing. It should have felt intrusive, going through a stranger's home. Instead, it felt oddly natural, like slipping into a role she'd been made for. By late afternoon, the house smelled of bread baking and stew simmering, and when the children tumbled in dusty and tired but smiling, Eliza realized they'd all survived a full day. Together, safe. That night at dinner, Cade complimented the bread, and Rebecca beamed. Daniel reported on fence repairs with the seriousness of a foreman, and Cade listened attentively, asking questions, treating the 15-year-old like an equal. The younger children's eyes were bright, their cheeks less hollow, Timothy's fever finally broken, and the boy demanding seconds. After the meal, as dishes were cleared and the children prepared for bed, Nora approached Cade shyly. Mr. Mercer? Her small voice was hesitant. Are we really allowed to stay? For more than tonight? Cade knelt down, meeting her at eye level. You're really allowed to stay, for as long as your mama decides you should. Forever? Nora's eyes were huge with hope and fear. That's up to your mama. Cade glanced at Eliza. But you're welcome here as long as you need to be. Nora threw her arms around his neck in an impulsive hug, and Eliza saw Cade's expression crack. Surprise, pain, something tender and broken and healing all at once. He patted the little girl's back gently, then sent her off to bed with a smile that didn't quite hide the wetness in his eyes. Later, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Eliza found Cade on the porch again, staring out at the star-filled sky. You didn't have to be so kind to her, Eliza said softly. To any of them. Yes, I did. Cade's voice was rough. They're good kids who've been through hell. They deserve kindness. They're going to get attached. Eliza wrapped her arms around herself. And when we leave, whenever that is, it's going to hurt them. Maybe. Cade didn't look at her. Or maybe they'll remember that someone cared, even temporarily. That's worth something, isn't it? Eliza didn't have an answer for that. She stood beside him in the darkness, listening to the prairie wind and the distant call of a nightbird, and wondered how long this fragile peace could possibly last. 3 weeks passed like water through cupped hands, precious, impossible to hold, gone before Eliza could fully believe they'd been real. The ranch settled into rhythms that felt almost normal. Breakfast at dawn, work through the morning, midday dinner around the long table, afternoon chores, supper as the sun painted the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. The children filled the house with noise and life, exactly as Cade had said Sarah would have wanted, and slowly, so slowly Eliza almost didn't notice. The sharp edges of their desperation began to soften. Daniel and James worked alongside Cade from sunup to sundown, learning to mend fence and manage livestock with the intensity of boys determined to prove their worth. Rebecca took over the kitchen with quiet efficiency, and the twins transformed the neglected vegetable garden into something that might actually produce food come harvest. Even little Nora had her role, mothering Timothy and baby Ruth with fierce tenderness, singing to them in a voice that reminded Eliza painfully of her own mother, dead these 10 years. But beneath the surface calm, tension coiled like a spring wound too tight. The town of Hollow Creek, 5 miles south, the nearest settlement with an actual general store and post office, had noticed the sudden appearance of a widow and 9 children at Cade Mercer's ranch, and what the town noticed, the town discussed. Eliza first became aware of the gossip on a Thursday afternoon when she accompanied Cade to town for supplies. She'd resisted the trip, wanting to stay invisible, but they needed fabric for clothes and flour for bread and a dozen other necessities that couldn't be avoided. The children had stayed behind with Daniel in charge, and Eliza had climbed onto the wagon seat beside Cade with her spine straight and her chin up, armoring herself against whatever judgment awaited. The stairs began the moment they rolled down Main Street. Women in their clean dresses and proper bonnets stopped their conversations to watch. Men outside the saloon nudged each other, muttering behind their hands. By the time Cade pulled up in front of Morrison's general store, Eliza felt stripped naked by their collective scrutiny. "Ignore them," Cade said quietly, offering his hand to help her down. Small-town gossips with nothing better to do. But ignoring poison didn't make it less toxic. Inside the store, Mrs. Morrison, a stern woman with the pinched expression of someone perpetually smelling something unpleasant, regarded Eliza with cold assessment. "Mrs. Ward," the name came out clipped, disapproving. "I'd heard rumors you'd taken up residence at the Mercer Ranch, with your considerable family." "Mrs. Ward and her children are my employees," Cade said evenly, already pulling items from shelves. "I've needed help running the place, and they've needed work. Fair arrangement for everyone." "I'm sure." Mrs. Morrison's tone suggested she thought it anything but fair. "Though I wonder what your dear departed Sarah would think of such an arrangement. A widow and 9 children moving into a bachelor's home. The appearance of impropriety alone is nobody's business but mine." Cade's voice carried a warning edge. "I'll take 30 pounds of flour, 20 of sugar, salt, coffee, and fabric. Rebecca gave me a list of measurements." He handed over a paper covered in Rebecca's careful handwriting, and Mrs. Morrison accepted it with pursed lips. As she gathered the supplies, she kept up a running commentary designed to sound like concern, but sharpened with judgment. "Of course, Mr. Mercer, we all understand you're a generous man. perhaps too generous for your own good. Taking on such a burden, 9 children, the expense alone must be staggering, and the questions it raises about the nature of the arrangement. She emphasized the last word meaningfully. People do talk, you understand. They wonder about a woman who would move herself and her children into a man's home with such haste, the presumption of it. Eliza felt her face burn. She'd known this was coming, had prepared herself for it, but the reality of standing in a public store being dissected like a specimen still made her want to sink through the floorboards. The presumption, Cade said coldly, is thinking you have any say in how I run my ranch or who I employ. Mrs. Morrison, if you'd rather not have my business, I can take it to Garrett's in the next county. Your choice. Mrs. Morrison's mouth snapped shut. Garrett's was a full day's ride away, and everyone knew Morrison's general store survived on rancher business like Cade's. She finished gathering supplies in frigid silence, calculated the total with sharp, angry movements, and accepted Cade's payment without another word. Outside, loading the wagon, Eliza finally found her voice. I'm sorry. I've brought scandal on you. The town thinks that we're... She couldn't even say it. The town thinks what small-minded people always think when they see something that doesn't fit their narrow view of propriety. Cade secured the last crate with quick, angry movements. Let them talk. It doesn't change the truth. But it affects you, your reputation, your standing in the community. My standing? Cade laughed, harsh and bitter. Eliza, I'm a widower who's been half dead for 6 years. Before you and your children arrived, people looked at me with pity. Now they look at you with judgment. I know which I prefer. That's not fair to you. Nothing about life is fair. Cade climbed onto the wagon seat, offered his hand to help her up. But you and those kids are the first thing that's felt right in a long time. So let the gossips whisper. They'll find something else to talk about eventually. But the gossips didn't move on. If anything, the whispers intensified. 2 days after the trip to town, Reverend Ashford rode out to the ranch, his expression grave and his intentions transparent. Eliza watched from the kitchen window as Cade met him in the yard, and even from a distance she could read the tension in Cade's shoulders. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could imagine it well enough. The impropriety of the situation, the damage to both their reputations, the impact on the children growing up in a household of sin. The Reverend's hands moved in emphatic gestures, and Cade's responses were clipped, controlled, his anger barely leashed. When the Reverend finally rode away, Cade stood in the yard for a long moment before stalking into the barn. He didn't emerge for hours, and when he did, his knuckles were scraped bloody from what looked like a violent encounter with a fence post or barn wall. Let me see. Eliza cornered him at the water pump, her tone brooking no argument. She cleaned his hands with careful efficiency, wrapping the worst of the splits with clean cloth. What did the Reverend say? Nothing worth repeating. Cade's jaw was tight. Religious justification for small-minded bigotry, dressed up in concern for our immortal souls. He wants us to leave. He suggested that if you insisted on staying, the proper thing would be for us to marry, to legitimize the arrangement and stop the scandal. Cade's laugh was sharp. Because apparently 9 children living in my house is only acceptable if I've claimed ownership of their mother through a legal contract. The words hung between them, awkward and charged. Marriage. The idea was absurd. They barely knew each other, were bound only by circumstance and necessity, had no feelings beyond mutual respect and practical partnership. And yet, standing there with her hands still resting on his bandaged knuckles, Eliza felt something flutter in her chest. Something dangerous and unwelcome and utterly inappropriate. That's ridiculous, she said, releasing his hands and stepping back. We're employer and employee, that's all. That's what I told him. Cade flexed his fingers, testing the bandages. He didn't believe me. Said if we weren't willing to marry, then clearly there was something shameful about the arrangement. That decent people would do the right thing, and our refusal proved we weren't decent. So we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. Eliza felt fury rise in her throat. We marry, and they say I trapped you. We don't marry, and they say we're living in sin. There's no winning. No, Cade agreed. There's not. Which is why I stopped caring what they think. He met her eyes directly. The question is whether you can do the same. Could she? Eliza had spent her whole life caring what people thought, measuring her worth by community approval, shaping herself to fit their expectations. But community approval hadn't saved her husband or protected her children or kept them from starving on a dusty road. Community approval was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I can try," she said quietly. The days after the Reverend's visit carried a new weight. The older children had heard enough to understand they were the subject of town gossip, and it showed in little ways. Rebecca's shoulders hunched when she thought no one was watching, Daniel's jaw tight with suppressed anger, the twins whispering together in corners. Even little Nora seemed subdued, asking fewer questions, laughing less freely. It was James who finally broke, 2 weeks later, after a trip to town with Cade for blacksmith supplies. He came home with a split lip and skinned knuckles, and when Eliza demanded an explanation, he exploded. "They called Mama a whore!" The 14-year-old's voice cracked with rage and tears. "Said she was trading herself for a roof, said we were all bastards living off Mr. Mercer's charity, and He'd punched the banker's son, apparently, given the older boy a bloody nose before Cade had pulled them apart. And now James stood in the kitchen shaking with adrenaline and shame, expecting punishment, expecting to be told he'd made things worse. Instead, Cade clapped him on the shoulder. "Good right hook. Your father teach you that?" James blinked, confused. Yes, sir, before he died." "He taught you well. But next time, wait until there aren't witnesses. Less trouble that way." Cade's expression was grim. "I'm sorry you had to hear those things. They're lies, all of them, and anyone with eyes can see it. But people believe what they want to believe. It's not fair." James's voice was thick with unshed tears. "Mama's the strongest person I know. She kept us alive, kept us together when everyone else said to split us up. And they act like we're garbage," Daniel supplied flatly from the doorway. "They act like we're garbage they wish would disappear." The silence that followed was heavy with shared pain. Eliza looked at her children, her beautiful, brave, damaged children who'd survived so much and were now being punished for the crime of accepting help, and felt something harden in her chest. "Maybe we should go," she said quietly. "Move on to Laramie like we planned. I can find work, we can—" "No!" The chorus came from multiple voices at once. Daniel, Rebecca, even little Nora shaking her head vehemently. "This is home," Nora said simply. "We don't want to leave home." "But if staying here means you're going to be treated like what we've been treated everywhere?" Rebecca's voice was sharp. "Mama, there's nowhere we can go where people won't judge us. At least here we have shelter and food. And someone who—" She glanced at Cade. "Someone who doesn't see us as a burden." "Your daughter's right." Cade moved to the stove, started preparing the evening's coffee with practiced motions. "Running won't solve anything. The gossips will follow you, create new stories, make up new sins. At least here, you've got a roof and work and—" He paused. "And me, for what that's worth." It was worth more than he knew, more than Eliza could articulate. But before she could find words, the sound of hoofbeats in the yard interrupted them. Multiple horses, moving fast. Cade's expression went cold. "Daniel, take the kids upstairs. Eliza, stay here." He pulled a rifle from its mount above the door, checked the load with quick, competent movements. "What's happening?" Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. "Don't know yet, but men riding fast at dusk usually means trouble." Cade moved to the door, cracked it open, peered out. 3 riders. Can't see faces yet, but— His voice went flat. "Ah, hell, it's the land agents." Eliza's blood turned to ice. Land agents, the same breed of vultures who'd helped destroy her life once before. "What do they want?" "With us? Nothing good." Cade handed her a smaller pistol from his belt. "You know how to use this?" "William taught me." Eliza took the weapon, her hands surprisingly steady. "I'm not shooting anyone unless they try to hurt my children." "Fair enough." Cade stepped onto the porch, rifle held loosely but ready. "Let's see what they want." The riders resolved into 3 men as they approached. 2 she didn't recognize and 1 she did. Marcus Dalton, the cattle baron's foreman who'd been present when William died. Recognition hit her like a physical blow, and she gasped. Cade glanced back at her. You know him? He was there, Eliza whispered, when they killed William. He stood by and watched and did nothing. Cade's expression went from cold to glacial. When he turned back to face the riders, his voice carried the weight of barely controlled violence. Dalton, you're not welcome here. Turn around. Dalton, a big man with mean eyes and a mouth that curled in perpetual disdain, laughed. Now, Mercer, is that any way to greet neighbors? We're just here with some friendly advice. I don't need advice from men who murder homesteaders and steal their land. Cade's rifle shifted slightly, not quite aiming, but close. Say what you came to say and leave. The two men flanking Dalton shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward their own weapons. The tension ratcheted up another notch, violence humming in the air like electricity before a storm. We've been hearing interesting things, Dalton said, his tone conversational but his eyes hard. About you taking in a certain widow and her extensive family. Same widow whose husband got himself killed over a property dispute last spring. Now, that seems like an odd choice for a smart man like you, Mercer, taking on someone else's trouble. Mrs. Ward and her children are my employees. What business is it of yours? It's our business when that widow's presence might cause complications. There are men in this territory who don't take kindly to people harboring folks who made accusations about legitimate business dealings. Accusations that couldn't be proven, mind you, but that nonetheless left a bad taste. Dalton's smile was all teeth. We're just suggesting that maybe it would be healthier for everyone if the widow moved along. Took her brood somewhere else, before anyone gets hurt. Behind Cade, Eliza felt rage override fear. These men had killed her husband, stolen her home, and now they had the audacity to threaten her children. She stepped onto the porch, ignoring Cade's warning glance. My husband was murdered, she said clearly. Shot down in cold blood over a fence line dispute that was manufactured to steal our land. Everyone knows it, even if no one will say it. And now you come here threatening me and mine because you're afraid the truth might come out? No proof of murder, Mrs. Ward. Dalton's eyes glittered dangerously. Just an unfortunate accident. And as for threats, well, we're just concerned citizens worried about Mr. Mercer's welfare. Taking on 9 extra mouths to feed, sheltering a woman of questionable reputation, it's a burden that might break a man. We'd hate to see that happen. Get off my land. Cade's voice was quiet, deadly. Now. We're going. Dalton gathered his reins but didn't move. Just remember what we said, Mercer. Sometimes charity costs more than a man can afford to pay. Sometimes the smart thing is to cut your losses before they drag you under. His gaze shifted to Eliza. And Mrs. Ward? You might want to think about those children of yours. 9 of them, all depending on you to make smart choices. Would be a shame if your stubbornness put them in danger. The threat was implicit, but unmistakable. Eliza felt cold spread through her chest, but before she could respond, Cade took 3 steps forward, rifle rising. You just threatened children on my property, he said softly. That's a mistake you won't make twice. If I see you or your men near this ranch again, if I hear about anyone bothering these kids in town, if so much as a fence post gets knocked down suspiciously, I will hold you personally responsible. And Dalton? I'm not some homesteader you can push around. I've got friends in the territorial government, connections you can't touch, and enough money to make your life very difficult. So choose your next move carefully. The standoff held for a long, tense moment. Then Dalton spat in the dirt, wheeled his horse, and galloped off with his men trailing behind. The dust they kicked up hung in the evening air long after the hoofbeats faded. Cade stood frozen on the porch, rifle still raised, every muscle tight with suppressed violence. Eliza watched him, watched the tremor in his shoulders that spoke of adrenaline and rage, and understood suddenly that this quiet, gentle man was capable of dangerous things when pushed. Cade, she touched his arm gently. They're gone. He lowered the rifle slowly, exhaled shakily. They'll be back. Maybe not them specifically, but someone. They're testing boundaries, seeing if I'll fold. Will you? Eliza's voice was small. If it comes down to it, if they really threaten you or the ranch or... No. Cade turned to face her, his eyes still storm dark, but certain. I won't fold. I won't send you away, and I won't let them hurt your children. That's not who I am. Even if it costs you everything? Everything was already gone, Cade said quietly. You and those kids gave me something to protect again. Gave me a reason to care whether I lived or died. So no, I won't give that up just because some hired thugs tried to scare me. Eliza felt tears threaten and blinked them back furiously. This isn't your fight. We've brought nothing but trouble. Stop. Cade's hand cupped her cheek, the gesture startling them both. He dropped it quickly, stepped back, but the warmth of his palm lingered on her skin. Stop apologizing for existing, Eliza. You're not trouble. You're a woman trying to keep her family safe, and I'm a man trying to do something good with the life I have left. That's all. Before Eliza could respond, childish screams erupted from inside the house. High, terrified, urgent. Both adults spun toward the door as Daniel burst through it, his face white with panic. It's Evan! He fell in the creek! He's being swept away! Time fractured. One heartbeat, Eliza was standing on the porch. The next she was running, dress hiked up, heart slamming against her ribs. The creek, swollen from recent rains, running fast and cold and deadly, curved behind the property. How had Evan gotten there? Why had no one been watching him? Questions for later. Right now, just run. She reached the creek bank in time to see her 10-year-old son tumbling in the current, his head going under, bobbing up, his arms flailing desperately. He'd gone too far out, gotten pulled into the deep channel, and the current was dragging him downstream toward where the creek narrowed between jagged rocks. Evan! Eliza's scream tore from her throat. She started into the water, but Daniel grabbed her arm. Mama, no, you can't swim that well. You'll both drown. A splash interrupted him. Cade had hit the water at a full sprint, diving into the current with no hesitation, no thought for safety. Eliza watched in frozen horror as he disappeared beneath the roiling surface. A second stretched into eternity, as her son's head went under again and didn't come up. Then Cade surfaced. Evan clutched against his chest, fighting the current that tried to rip them both downstream. He was strong, Eliza realized. Years of ranch work had built muscle and endurance, but the creek was stronger. It pulled them toward the rocks, toward the narrow chute where the water funneled through with enough force to shatter bones. The rope! Daniel was already running back toward the barn. I'll get the rope! But there wasn't time. Cade and Evan were seconds from the rocks, and once they hit that chute, they'd be lost. Eliza made a split-second decision born of desperation. She grabbed a low-hanging cottonwood branch, leaned as far over the water as she could, and screamed Cade's name. He saw her, saw what she was doing, and angled toward the bank with powerful strokes. The current fought him every inch, but he was fighting back with everything he had. One arm locked around Evan, the other clawing through the water, 3 feet from the branch, 2 feet. The rocks loomed, water churning white and violent. Eliza's fingers brushed Cade's outstretched hand. Missed. He went under, and she thought that was it. They were gone. She'd lost another person she cared about. The realization hit as Cade's head broke the surface again, as his hand closed around her wrist in a grip that sent pain shooting up her arm. She grabbed the branch with her other hand, felt her shoulder scream in protest as his full weight plus Evan's pulled against her, felt herself sliding toward the water. Then other hands grabbed her, Daniel and Rebecca, anchoring her, pulling back. Between them, they hauled Cade and Evan close enough to the bank that Cade could find purchase, could drag them both onto solid ground before collapsing, coughing water, his shoulder torn open where a submerged rock had caught him. Evan vomited creek water and sobbed. Cade just lay on his back gasping, blood spreading across his shirt, his face gray with exhaustion and pain. You're hurt. Eliza was already stripping off her shawl, pressing it to the wound. The gash was deep, ragged, bleeding heavily. You need a doctor. No time, just bind it tight. Cade's voice was thread-thin but steady. The boy, is he? I'm okay. Evan was crying, shaking, but alive and breathing. I'm sorry. I just wanted to catch a fish for dinner, and I slipped. And, hush! Eliza wanted to scold him, to shake him for being so reckless, but relief overwhelmed anger. You're safe. That's all that matters. She bound Cade's shoulder as tightly as she could while Daniel and Rebecca helped him to his feet. The walk back to the house took forever, Cade leaning heavily on Daniel, his face twisted with pain. He was trying desperately to hide from the children who'd gathered in a frightened cluster. Inside, Eliza cleared the kitchen table and made Cade lie down while she assessed the damage. The wound was worse than she'd thought. Not just torn skin, but damaged muscle, the kind of injury that could cripple if not treated properly. "This needs stitching," she said quietly. "Real doctoring, not just field medicine." "Can't afford the gossip." Cade's voice was strained. "Having the doc out here, him seeing you and the kids, it'll just fuel more rumors." "I don't care about rumors. You're bleeding." "Then you stitch it." Cade's eyes found hers. "You've done medical work before. I've seen you with the kids when they're sick. You can do this." Eliza wanted to protest, but he was right. She'd learned basic field medicine by necessity, had stitched her husband's injuries more than once. Her hands were steady, her knowledge sufficient. What she lacked was courage, the courage to hurt someone she cared about, even to heal them. But Cade had jumped into a flooding creek to save her child without hesitation. The least she could do was return the favor. "Rebecca, boil water and bring me the sewing kit. Daniel, find whiskey. There's a bottle in the cupboard. Margaret, Martha, keep the little ones upstairs and distracted." Eliza rolled up her sleeves. "And Cade? This is going to hurt." "I know." His jaw was tight, his breathing shallow. "Do what needs doing." She cleaned the wound with boiled water and whiskey, watching him bite down on leather to keep from screaming. She threaded the needle with fingers that didn't shake despite the terror in her heart. And then she stitched him back together, pulling torn flesh into alignment, her movements careful and sure, while he gripped the table edge hard enough to leave marks in the wood. 15 stitches. By the time she finished, Cade's face was gray and slick with sweat, but he hadn't made a sound beyond harsh breathing through clenched teeth. Eliza bandaged the shoulder with clean cloth, her hands gentle now that the worst was done. "You need to rest," she said quietly. "No work for at least a week, maybe 2. "Can't rest. Ranch doesn't run itself." "Then we run it." Daniel's voice came from the doorway, young but determined. "Me and James and the girls. We've been learning from you, Mr. Mercer. We can handle things while you heal." Cade looked at the boy, 15 years old and trying so hard to be a man, and something in his expression softened. "You'll need help with the heavy work." "We'll figure it out." Rebecca appeared beside her brother, equally determined. "You saved Evan's life. You got hurt protecting our family. Let us take care of you for once." "Family." Cade repeated the word slowly, as if tasting it. His gaze shifted to Eliza, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the acknowledgement of a truth they'd both been avoiding. "Is that what we are now?" Eliza looked at this man who'd taken them in when no one else would, who'd faced down land agents and town gossip, who'd just nearly died saving her child. She looked at her children clustered in the doorway, their faces tight with worry for the man who'd become more than just their employer. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down, demanding honesty. "Yes," she whispered. "I think maybe we are." Cade's good hand found hers, squeezed gently. "Good," he murmured, his voice rough with exhaustion and pain and something else, something that made Eliza's heart stutter. "I want all of you, remember?" Then his eyes closed, consciousness slipping away, and Eliza sat beside him, holding his hand while her children gathered close, and the reality of what had happened, what had almost happened, crashed over them all. Family keeps each other alive. Cade had said that, there in the water, risking everything for a child that wasn't his. And in that moment, Eliza finally understood what he'd been offering from the beginning. Not charity, not pity, but belonging. A place where they could be more than burdens, more than survivors, more than the desperate refugees no one wanted. A place where they could be home. Cade woke in his own bed with no memory of getting there, his shoulders screaming and his mouth tasting like old leather and regret. Afternoon light slanted through the window, golden and warm, and for a confused moment he thought he was alone. Then he heard the soft rustle of fabric and turned his head to find Eliza sitting in the chair beside the bed, her sewing forgotten in her lap, her eyes closed in exhausted sleep. She looked different in repose, younger, the lines of worry smoothed from her face, her dark hair escaping its pins to curl around her cheeks. Beautiful, Cade thought, then immediately felt guilty for thinking it. She was his employee, a widow under his protection, a woman who'd trusted him to keep her children safe. Noticing that she was beautiful felt like a violation of that trust. But he noticed anyway, and the noticing made his chest tight with something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Something dangerous and unwelcome and utterly impossible to ignore. "You're staring!" Eliza's eyes opened, catching him, and Cade felt heat rise in his face like a schoolboy caught passing notes. "Sorry, I was just wondering how I got upstairs." "Daniel and James carried you. You were unconscious by then, which was probably a mercy given how much the movement must have hurt." Eliza set aside her sewing, leaned forward to check his bandages with practiced efficiency. "How's the pain?" "Manageable." A lie. His shoulder felt like it was being torn apart by wolves, but admitting weakness had never come easy. "How long was I out?" 14 hours. It's past noon now." Her fingers were gentle against his skin, checking for fever, for infection, for the 100 small signs that a wound was going bad. "You were lucky. The rock missed the major blood vessels by inches. If it had hit differently—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Cade heard what she wasn't saying. "If it had hit differently, he'd have bled out in the creek, and Evan would have drowned, and this fragile thing they'd been building would have shattered before it had a chance to become real." "The boy?" Cade asked. "Fine. Shaken, guilty, promising never to go near the creek again without permission." Eliza's smile was wan. "He's been up here 6 times to check on you, convinced this is all his fault." "It's not. Kids do foolish things. That's their job." Cade tried to sit up, gasped as pain lanced through his shoulder and fell back against the pillows. "Damn it! Don't move." Eliza pressed him back gently but firmly. "You tore muscle, Cade. It needs time to heal, and you pushing yourself too soon will only make it worse. The ranch is being managed. Your children—" She paused, corrected herself. "My children are handling the daily work. Daniel's got a natural head for livestock, and Rebecca's been organizing everything else like a field general. We're fine. You need to rest." "Your children." Cade caught the slip, saw the faint color rise in her cheeks. "You almost called them mine." "I misspoke." "Did you?" Cade held her gaze, saw the truth she was trying to hide. "Because last night you said we were family. I remember that much, even through the pain fog." Eliza stood abruptly, moved to the window, her back to him. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "You nearly died saving Evan. In that moment, it felt appropriate to acknowledge what you've become to us. But in the clear light of day, we both know the reality. You're my employer. We're your workers. Anything else is just what?" Cade pushed himself up on his good elbow, ignoring the protest from his shoulder. "Just foolish? Just dangerous? Just too complicated to acknowledge?" "All of the above." Eliza wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture of self-protection Cade had seen too many times. "You jumped into that creek without thinking. You risked your life for my child. Do you understand what that means to me? What it would have done to the children if you died?" "I understand that sometimes you don't think. You just act." Cade's voice was rough. "That boy was drowning. I wasn't going to stand there and watch." "Because you're a good man." Eliza turned to face him, and Cade saw tears tracking down her cheeks. "You're a good man, and I've brought nothing but trouble to your door. The town gossips about us. Land agents threaten you, and now you're laid up with an injury that could have killed you, all because you decided to help a desperate widow with too many children." "Stop that!" Cade tried to swing his legs out of bed, managed it on the second attempt despite the nausea that rose in his throat. "Stop making yourself small. Stop apologizing for existing. You didn't bring trouble. Trouble found you, and you survived it with more courage than most people show in a lifetime. Cade, you need to lie down. I need you to listen." He stood, swayed, caught himself on the bedpost. "That day I found you on the road, you were dying. All of you were dying, and you were still walking, still fighting, still refusing to quit. Do you know what that did to me? Seeing that kind of strength, that kind of stubborn refusal to surrender?" Eliza shook her head, mute. It woke something up, Cade said quietly. Something I thought died with Sarah. Purpose, maybe, or just caring whether tomorrow came. For 6 years, I went through the motions. Worked the ranch because it's what you do, not because it mattered. Ate because bodies need fuel, not because food tasted good. Existed without living, and I didn't even realize how hollow that was until you and your children filled this house with noise and chaos and life. We're not your second chance at the family you lost. Eliza's voice broke. We can't be that for you. It's not fair to anyone. You're right. You're not Sarah, and those children aren't the babies I never got to have. Cade took a step toward her, his good hand extended. But you're something else. Something I didn't expect and didn't plan for and can't seem to stop wanting. You're brave and fierce and so damn strong it makes my chest ache. And those kids, they're good people growing up under impossible circumstances and watching them heal, watching them become children again instead of survivors. Eliza, that matters. It matters more than anything has mattered in years. This is a bad idea. But Eliza's hand reached for his anyway, her fingers trembling as they laced through his. We barely know each other. You're injured, and I'm a mess. My life is complicated and messy and full of children who need more than I can give them. Then let me help give it. Cade pulled her closer, ignoring the scream from his shoulder. Not as your employer, not as charity, as, he searched for the right word, found only truth, as someone who cares. About you, about them, about this thing we've been building without meaning to. The town will crucify us. Let them try. Dalton and his men will come back, and I'll deal with them. You could lose everything. Everything was already lost. Cade cupped her face with his good hand, his thumb brushing away her tears. You gave it back to me. So whatever comes next, whatever trouble follows, we face it together, if you'll have me. Eliza looked at him with those dark eyes that had seen too much pain, too much loss, and Cade saw the war being fought behind them. Fear versus hope. Self-protection versus trust. The safe choice of staying detached versus the terrifying possibility of letting someone in. I don't know how, she whispered. After William died, after everything that happened, I don't know how to let myself care again. Don't know how to risk it. Neither do I. Cade's voice was rough with honesty. Sarah's death broke something in me. Trusting that life won't rip away everything I love again. That's not easy. But Eliza, you're already here. Your children are already here. I already care, and pushing you away won't make that hurt less if something goes wrong. It'll just mean I wasted whatever time we had being too scared to take the chance. That's not rational. No. Cade smiled, sad and hopeful in equal measure. It's not. But since when is caring about someone rational? Eliza let out a shaky laugh, then did something that surprised them both. She stepped into his space, rested her forehead against his good shoulder, and let herself be held. Carefully, mindful of his injury, Cade wrapped his arm around her and felt something slot into place in his chest. Something that had been missing so long, he'd forgotten it existed. They stood like that for a long moment, not quite embracing but no longer separate. Two people who'd been broken by loss learning slowly how to fit together. Then a knock on the door made them spring apart like guilty teenagers. Mama? Nora's small voice came through the wood. Is Mr. Mercer awake? We made soup. Eliza wiped her eyes quickly, smoothed her hair, tried to look like she hadn't just been standing in an injured man's arms contemplating impossible things. Yes, sweetheart. Come in. The door opened to reveal not just Nora, but all 9 children, crowded in the doorway like a worried delegation. Daniel held a tray with a bowl of soup and bread. Rebecca had fresh bandages, the twins carried water, and the younger ones just stared at Cade with wide, anxious eyes. We thought you might be hungry, Daniel said, his voice carefully neutral in that way teenagers use when they're pretending not to have feelings. And Mama said your bandages need changing. That's very thoughtful. Cade looked at Eliza, saw her fighting not to laugh at the absurdity of the moment, and felt his own smile tugging at his mouth. Though I'm not sure I need quite so many nurses. We wanted to help. Evan's voice was small, guilty. Since it's my fault you got hurt. It's not your fault, son. Accidents happen. Cade moved back toward the bed, sat down before his legs could betray him. But I appreciate the concern. The children filed in, arranging themselves around the room with the careful choreography of people who'd learned to share small spaces. Daniel set the tray on the bedside table. Rebecca laid out bandages with professional precision, and the younger ones simply settled on the floor like puppies seeking reassurance that the pack was intact. Watching Eliza change his bandages while surrounded by her children, their children, his treacherous mind whispered. Cade felt something settle in his chest. This, he thought, this is what living feels like. Not just existing, not just going through motions, but being part of something messy and complicated and utterly real. Mr. Mercer? Nora's small hand touched his good arm. Are you going to be okay? You're not going to die like Papa did, are you? The fear in her voice made Cade's chest ache. I'm going to be fine, sweetheart. Just need some rest and time to heal. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Those big eyes demanded truth, not platitudes. I promise. Cade glanced at Eliza, saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. I'm not leaving any of you, not if I can help it. Over the next 3 days, Cade learned what it meant to be cared for by a family. The children rotated through his room in shifts, Daniel bringing ranch reports morning and evening, Rebecca delivering meals with the efficiency of a field hospital nurse, the twins reading to him from Sarah's old books, the younger ones simply sitting quietly and drawing pictures they'd leave on his bedside table. Even baby Ruth made appearances, her small presence a warm weight in his good arm while Eliza tended to chores. It was exhausting and overwhelming and the best thing that had happened to him in 6 years. But the outside world didn't stop just because Cade was confined to bed. On the 4th day after the accident, Daniel came upstairs with his face tight with worry. We've got a problem, he said without preamble. 3 head of cattle missing from the north pasture. Fence was cut, not broken. Cade's stomach dropped. Cut fence meant deliberate theft, and deliberate theft meant Dalton was making good on his threat. How recent? Last night, I'd guess. I only noticed this morning during the count. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. I know what you're thinking, that it's those land agents, but Mama says we should just report it to the sheriff and let the law handle it. Your Mama's right. Cade pushed himself up carefully, testing his shoulder. The pain was less now, more ache than agony. But the sheriff won't do anything. Dalton's boss has half the county in his pocket. So what do we do? Just let them steal from us? We, Cade caught the pronoun, saw Daniel's face flush. From you. I meant from you. No, you didn't. Cade stood slowly, reaching for the shirt Rebecca had laid out. And you're right. It's us now. This ranch, this family, all of it, so we handle it together. You can't ride with that shoulder. I'm not riding anywhere, but I can write letters, call in favors, make it clear that stealing from me isn't worth the trouble. Cade managed to get his good arm through the shirt sleeve, gave up on the other. Help me with this? Daniel moved to assist, his young face serious. Those men killed my father. If they come here, if they try to hurt Mama, or the others, then we'll deal with it. Cade gripped the boy's shoulder with his good hand. But Daniel, listen to me. I know you want revenge. I know you want to make them pay. But that kind of anger will eat you alive if you let it. Trust me, I've been there. How do you let it go? Daniel's voice cracked. How do you just forgive someone for taking everything? You don't forgive. Not really. But you choose not to let their actions define your future. Cade met the boy's eyes directly. Your father's death was a terrible thing, criminal, unjust. But you surviving it, your family surviving it, that's not nothing. You're here, you're alive, you're building something new. Don't let those men take that away by turning you into someone ruled by hate. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Did your wife's death make you bitter? The question was too perceptive for comfort. Yes, Cade admitted. For years I was hollow and angry and so focused on what I'd lost that I couldn't see anything else. Then your family showed up, and suddenly I had a reason to look forward instead of back. That's what saved me. Not letting go of Sarah, but finding something new worth protecting. Mama, Daniel's voice was thoughtful. You care about Mama. It wasn't a question, but Cade answered anyway. Yes, I care about all of you, but especially her. Does that bother you? No? Daniel's smile was small but genuine. Papa would have wanted Mama to be happy, and you make her less sad than she's been since he died. That's enough for me. Cade felt his throat tighten. Your father raised a good man. He tried. Daniel helped Cade into a sling Rebecca had fashioned from spare cloth. Come on, if you're determined to work, Mama will kill both of us if you overdo it. They made their way downstairs to find organized chaos. Rebecca had taken over the kitchen, directing the twins in meal preparation while simultaneously managing a crying Ruth and negotiating a dispute between Samuel and Evan about whose turn it was to feed the chickens. Eliza stood in the middle of it all, looking overwhelmed and exhausted and beautiful in her frustration. Mr. Mercer, you should not be out of bed, she said the moment she spotted him, but her eyes softened with something that made Cade's chest warm. I'm fine. And it's Cade. I think we're past formality. He moved to the table, eased himself into a chair. Daniel tells me we've had some trouble with the cattle. 3 head missing, fence cut deliberately. Eliza's expression hardened. Dalton's work, almost certainly, but without proof. Without proof, it's my word against his, which means we need to make it expensive for him to keep trying. Cade accepted the coffee Rebecca placed before him. I'm going to write to Judge Harrison in Cheyenne. He owes me a favor, and he's got no love for land grabbers. If we can get an investigation started into Dalton's boss, look into all those convenient land seizures, all those homesteaders who mysteriously lost their claims, then maybe we can put enough pressure on them to back off. That could take months. Eliza sat across from him, worry etched in every line of her face. What do we do in the meantime? We keep going. Work the ranch. Protect what's ours. Refuse to be intimidated. Cade reached across the table, took her hand. And we give them no ammunition for their gossip and threats. Which means... He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. This next part was a risk, a leap that could backfire spectacularly or solve multiple problems at once. Which means what? Eliza prompted. Which means we should get married. The kitchen went absolutely silent. 9 children froze in various poses of activity, all eyes swiveling toward their mother. Rebecca's mouth fell open. Daniel's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Even baby Ruth seemed to sense the weight of the moment, pausing in her fussing. Eliza stared at Cade like he'd suggested they all sprout wings and fly to Mexico. You cannot be serious. I'm completely serious. Cade kept his voice calm, reasonable, like he was proposing a business arrangement instead of something that would bind their lives together. Think about it. Married, we're respectable. Your reputation is protected, the children are legally under my care, and no one can whisper about improper arrangements. It solves everything. Except for the small detail that marriage is supposed to be about love, not convenience. Eliza pulled her hand back, her cheeks flushed. Cade, we've known each other barely 2 months. We're employer and employee. You don't just... Why not? Cade kept his tone even, despite the hammering of his heart. We already live together. We already care about each other. Marriage just makes it legal, makes it safe. For all of us. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard, Rebecca said flatly. Even I know you're supposed to at least pretend it's romantic. This isn't a romance. Eliza stood abruptly, her chair scraping. This is survival, and we don't need to complicate it with legal contracts. Mama. Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. Maybe we should think about it. Mr. Mercer's right. If you were married, the town gossips would have nothing to say, and if something happened to you... He couldn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. If Eliza died, her children would be orphans, but if she married Cade, they'd have legal protection. Nothing's going to happen to me, Eliza said sharply. That's what Papa thought. The words came from Evan, small and devastating. Then men killed him, and everything fell apart. Mr. Mercer's trying to keep that from happening again. Eliza looked at her children, at their anxious faces, their hope barely contained, their desperate desire for security, and Cade saw the exact moment she broke. This is not how marriage is supposed to work, she whispered. I know. Cade stood, moved to her side. Eliza, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking for a real marriage in any sense beyond legal protection. Separate rooms, separate lives, just a partnership to keep you and the children safe. That's not fair to you. Fair would be you not having to make this choice. But we don't live in a fair world. Cade's voice gentled. I'm offering what I can. My name, my protection, my resources. What you do with that is your choice. But please, at least consider it. The silence stretched painful and long. Then Nora stepped forward, her small hand slipping into Eliza's. I think you should marry him, Mama, she said simply. Then he'd be our papa, and we'd be a real family, and nobody could make us leave. Oh, sweetheart, Eliza's voice cracked. It's not that simple. Why not? Nora looked between them with the brutal logic of childhood. You like him. He likes you. He saved Evan. He's nice to us. Why can't he be our papa? Because marriage without love is a prison, Eliza wanted to say. Because I already lost one husband and barely survived it. Because letting Cade that close, legally binding myself to him, feels like tempting fate to rip away everything I care about again. But looking at Nora's hopeful face, at the cautious optimism in her other children's eyes, at Cade standing there offering everything he had with no expectation of return, how could she refuse? If we did this, she said slowly, and Cade's expression flared with hope, it would be a practical arrangement only. Separate bedrooms. No expectations. Just partnership for the sake of legal protection. Whatever terms you want. Cade's voice was rough with relief. I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give. Then, Eliza took a shaky breath. Then, yes. For the children's sake. Yes. The kitchen erupted in cheers and tears. The twins grabbed each other, dancing in circles. Daniel clapped James on the back, both boys grinning. Even Rebecca, ever practical, allowed herself a smile. And Nora launched herself at Cade, hugging him with enough force to make him wince. Easy on the shoulder, sweetheart, he laughed, but his good arm wrapped around the little girl, and when he looked at Eliza over Nora's head, his eyes held something that made Eliza's heart stutter. Not love. Not yet. But the possibility of it, fragile, terrifying, and utterly inevitable. They were married 3 days later in the ranch's front parlor with only the children as witnesses. No fancy dress, no elaborate ceremony, just Reverend Ashford reading vows with pursed disapproval while Cade stood in his cleanest shirt, and Eliza wore a simple blue dress Rebecca had helped her alter. The children crowded close, holding hands, and when Cade slipped a simple gold band on Eliza's finger, she felt the weight of it, like a promise and a warning both. You may kiss your bride, Reverend Ashford intoned with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a funeral. Cade looked at Eliza, question in his eyes. They hadn't discussed this part. Eliza nodded once, and he leaned in, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss so brief and chaste it barely counted. But even that moment of contact sent warmth flooding through her chest, and when he pulled back, Eliza saw her own confusion mirrored in his face. This was supposed to be practical, just a legal arrangement. So why did it feel like so much more? The children cheered anyway, and Rebecca produced a cake she'd baked in secret, and for one afternoon they pretended this was a real celebration of love instead of a defensive move against gossip and legal vulnerability. That night, Eliza stood in what was now officially her bedroom. Cade had moved his things to the small guest room despite her protests, and looked at the ring on her finger. Mrs. Cade Mercer. A name that wasn't hers but might become hers, given time and circumstance and the slow erosion of the walls around her heart. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called, expecting one of the children. Instead, Cade stood in the doorway, hesitant. Just wanted to make sure you were... That is, if you need anything. I'm fine. Eliza turned to face him. Thank you for today, for all of this. You're welcome, though I think I should be thanking you. You've given me a family again. Cade smiled, sad and hopeful. Eliza, I meant what I said. No expectations. This is whatever you want it to be. I know. Eliza moved closer, studying this man who'd become her husband through necessity and stayed through choice. Cade, what if I don't know what I want? What if I'm too broken to figure it out? Then we figure it out together. His good hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing her skin with heartbreaking gentleness. No rush, no pressure, just time, and whatever comes of it. Eliza let herself lean into his touch, just for a moment, allowing herself to imagine what it might be like if this practical arrangement became something real, something chosen, not from desperation, but from genuine feeling. Then she stepped back, putting safe distance between them. "Good night, Cade." "Good night, Eliza." He left, and she listened to his footsteps fade down the hall. Only then did she let herself sink onto the bed, ring glinting in the lamplight, and wonder what she'd just agreed to. Outside the window, the Wyoming night stretched vast and star-filled, full of possibilities that both terrified and tempted her in equal measure. Marriage, Eliza discovered, was strange when it existed only on paper. For 3 weeks after the ceremony, she and Cade moved around each other with careful politeness. Him in his guest room, her in what had been his bedroom, both maintaining the boundaries they had agreed upon, while the children watched with growing confusion. They worked the ranch together, shared meals, discussed household matters with the efficiency of business partners, and retired separately each night to rooms that felt too empty and too full at the same time. The town's reaction to their marriage was exactly what Cade had predicted. Gossip shifted from scandalous cohabitation to hasty weddings, and questions about whether Eliza had trapped him. But the venom had dulled somewhat, replaced by grudging acceptance. Mrs. Mercer was respectable now, even if the circumstances were suspect. The children were legally protected. The arrangement, however unconventional, was proper. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like limbo. Eliza caught herself watching Cade more than she should. The way he moved now that his shoulder was healing, the patience he showed teaching Evan to rope fence posts, the gentle competence with which he handled baby Ruth when she fussed. She noticed how Daniel sought his advice before making decisions, how Rebecca had started calling him Pa without seeming to realize it, how the younger children gravitated toward him like flowers toward sun. And she noticed the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, something hungry and careful and sad all at once, like a man who'd been offered treasure but forbidden to touch it. The 4th week after the wedding brought the first real test of their arrangement. Judge Harrison's response arrived by courier, a thick envelope containing not just a letter, but legal documents that made Eliza's hands shake as she read them. "He's opening an investigation," she said, looking up from the papers to where Cade sat across the kitchen table. The children were outside doing morning chores, giving them rare privacy. "Into Dalton's employer, into the land seizures, into William's death." "That's good news?" Cade leaned forward. "What's wrong?" "He needs testimony. From me, specifically. About what happened the day William died, about the land office fire, about everything." Eliza's voice was tight. "Which means going to Cheyenne, appearing before the territorial court, facing Dalton and his boss directly." "Then we'll go together." "Cade, that's a 3-day journey each way. Someone needs to stay with the children, keep the ranch running. Daniel can handle the ranch for a week. He's been doing most of the work anyway while I was healing." Cade's tone was firm. "And there's no way in hell I'm letting you face those men alone. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment I married you." Cade reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Eliza, you're my wife. Those children are my family now. What hurts you hurts all of us. So if testifying means you get justice for William and protection for the future, then we're doing it together." The warmth of his hand on hers made Eliza's chest tight. "You didn't sign up for this, for endless complications and legal battles, and I signed up for you." Cade's voice was quiet but absolute. "All of you, complications included. So stop trying to protect me from my own choices." Eliza looked at him. This man who'd saved her family, married her out of practical necessity, and somehow become essential to her existence, and felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking, but opening, letting light into spaces that had been dark too long. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always." Cade squeezed her hand gently, then released it before the moment could become too weighted. "Now, let's figure out logistics. Daniel's in charge while we're gone, with Rebecca as second. The twins can handle cooking, and James can manage livestock with Evan helping. I'll write instructions for everything that might come up, and we'll leave enough supplies to last 2 weeks in case we're delayed." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Eliza packed a small bag with clean clothes and the few legal documents she'd managed to save from the ranch fire. Cade wrote detailed instructions in his careful handwriting, going over every possible scenario with Daniel until the boy looked overwhelmed but determined. The children accepted the news with varying degrees of anxiety. Nora clung to Eliza's skirts. Rebecca put on her brave face, and the twins immediately started planning meals with military precision. "You're coming back, right?" Evan asked for the third time as they gathered for supper. "You're not just leaving?" "We're coming back." Cade's voice was rock-solid, certain. "This is home. We're not abandoning it or you. We're going to settle some legal business, and then we'll be right back here where we belong." "Promise?" Nora's small voice demanded. "Promise," Eliza and Cade said simultaneously, and the weight of that shared promise hung between them like something tangible. They left at dawn 2 days later, the wagon loaded with supplies for the journey. The children stood in a worried cluster on the porch, waving until the ranch disappeared behind a rise. Then it was just Eliza and Cade, the prairie stretching endless in every direction, and 3 days of traveling to fill with conversation they'd been avoiding. The first day passed in relative silence, both of them wrapped in their own thoughts. They made camp that night by a small creek, and Cade built a fire with practiced efficiency while Eliza prepared a simple meal of beans and hardtack. The domesticity of it felt both natural and strange, husband and wife sharing camp duties, except they barely knew how to be those things to each other. "Can I ask you something?" Eliza said as they sat by the fire, coffee warming their hands against the chill night air. "Anything." "Why did you really marry me? And don't say protection or practicality. I want the truth." Cade was quiet for a long time, staring into the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with honesty. "Because I was tired of being alone. Because your family brought life back to a house that had been dying with me inside it. Because—" He paused, looked at her directly. "Because somewhere between finding you on that road and jumping in the creek after Evan, I started caring about you in ways that had nothing to do with charity or duty. And marrying you, even under false pretenses, felt better than watching you eventually leave." Eliza's breath caught. "That's not fair." "No, it's not. To either of us." Cade's smile was sad. "I know you didn't marry me for love. I know this is just legal protection, just a way to keep your children safe. And I'm fine with that. I swear I am. But you asked for truth. And the truth is that if you ever wanted this to be more than an arrangement of convenience, I wouldn't say no." The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Eliza felt her heart hammering, felt the careful walls she'd built threatening to crumble entirely. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "After William, after losing everything, I don't know if I have it in me to love someone again. To risk that kind of loss. I'm not asking you to love me." Cade's voice was gentle. "I'm just saying that if you ever wanted to try, I'd be here. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility." Eliza looked at him across the firelight, at his storm-gray eyes and weathered face and the quiet strength that had saved her family, and felt something shift inside her. Not love, not yet, but the recognition that maybe, someday, she could allow herself to fall. "I'll think about it," she said softly. "That's all I'm asking." They finished their coffee in companionable silence, and when they bedded down for the night in separate bedrolls with proper distance between them, Eliza lay awake listening to Cade's breathing and wondering when exactly he'd stopped being just her employer and started being something infinitely more complicated. The second day brought rain, cold, driving sheets that turned the road to mud and forced them to seek shelter in an abandoned homestead. The roof leaked in 3 places, the walls were drafty, and the whole structure looked ready to collapse, but it was better than drowning in the wagon. They huddled by a smoky fire Cade coaxed to life using wood that was only marginally less wet than everything else. Eliza's dress was soaked through, her hair plastered to her head, and she couldn't stop shivering despite the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Come here." Cade gestured her closer to the fire. "You're freezing." "I'm fine." But her teeth were chattering, giving lie to the words. "Eliza, don't be stubborn. You'll catch pneumonia." When she didn't move, Cade sighed and came to her instead, wrapping his own dry blanket around both of them and pulling her against his side. "Body heat. Purely practical." It should have been awkward, should have felt like a violation of their careful boundaries. Instead, it felt like coming home, his warmth seeping into her cold skin, his arms solid around her shoulders, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear when she finally gave up and leaned into him fully. "This doesn't change anything," she said, but the protest was weak. "Of course not." Cade's voice held amusement. "Purely survival measures. Sarah would have approved. She was always practical about these things." "Tell me about her." Eliza didn't know where the request came from, only that suddenly she needed to know. Really tell me. Not just the perfect memory, but the real person. Cade was quiet for a moment, his hand absently rubbing her arm through the blanket. She was stubborn, infuriatingly so. Once she got an idea in her head, there was no talking her out of it. She wanted to homestead in Wyoming, despite everyone telling her it was too hard for a woman. She proposed to me after knowing me 3 weeks because, as she said, she didn't see the point in wasting time when she knew what she wanted. Eliza smiled despite herself. "She sounds formidable." She was, and kind. The kind that doesn't come from naivety, but from genuine belief that people deserve compassion. Cade's voice grew softer. "When she got sick, she made me promise not to let grief turn me bitter. Made me swear I'd keep living, keep finding joy, keep being open to whatever came next. I broke that promise for 6 years. Then you showed up, and for the first time since she died, I understood what she meant. I'm not her." "No, you're not. You're you, fierce and brave and so determined to protect your children it makes me ache. You don't remind me of Sarah. You remind me of why living matters." Cade's arm tightened around her. "And if that scares you, I'm sorry, but it's true." Eliza turned her face into his shoulder, breathing in the scent of wool and smoke and something uniquely Cade. "It terrifies me," she admitted, "caring about you, letting myself depend on you. What if something happens? What if I lose you too? Then you'll survive it, because that's what you do." Cade's voice was rough. "But Eliza, you can't live your whole life afraid of loss. That's not living. That's just existing, and you deserve more than that." "So do you. Then maybe we deserve it together." They stayed like that as the storm raged outside, neither quite willing to name what was happening between them, but both feeling the shift nonetheless. When Eliza finally dozed off, her head on Cade's shoulder and his arm around her waist, it felt less like a practical arrangement and more like a choice. A small, terrifying, wonderful choice to stop running from the possibility of caring again. She woke to weak morning sunlight filtering through the broken roof and Cade still holding her, his own head tilted back against the wall in uncomfortable sleep. Studying his face in the soft light, the lines around his eyes, the scar on his jaw she'd never asked about, the gentleness of his expression even in sleep, Eliza felt her heart do something dangerous. She was falling in love with her husband. The realization should have sent her scrambling away. Instead, she let herself have one more moment of his warmth before carefully extracting herself and starting coffee, letting him sleep while she processed this new, terrifying truth. They reached Cheyenne by late afternoon of the 3rd day, tired and trail-worn but intact. Judge Harrison received them in his chambers, a stern man with kind eyes, who listened to Eliza's testimony with increasing grimness. "This is worse than I thought," he said when she finished. "If even half of what you're telling me is true, we're looking at systematic land theft, multiple murders, and corruption that reaches into the territorial government itself." "It's all true." Eliza's voice was steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "I have no proof. Everything was destroyed in the fire. But I'm willing to testify under oath, face Dalton and his employer directly, and stand by every word. It could be dangerous. These are powerful men who've proven willing to kill to protect their interests." Judge Harrison looked at Cade. "Mr. Mercer, you understand what you're taking on by supporting this. I understand that my wife deserves justice and that those men need to be stopped before they destroy more families." Cade's voice was firm. "Whatever it takes. We're seeing this through." The investigation moved faster than expected. Judge Harrison had apparently been building a case for months, waiting for someone brave enough to testify. Eliza's statement provided the final piece, and within 2 days, warrants were issued for Dalton and 3 of his associates, including the cattle baron himself. The arrests happened at dawn on the 5th day. Eliza and Cade weren't there. The judge had insisted they stay safely away, but they heard about it secondhand. Dalton had tried to run. His employer had tried to buy his way out. Neither had succeeded, and by noon they were in territorial custody awaiting trial. "It's over," Eliza said wonderingly that evening as they prepared for the journey home. "It's actually over." "Not quite." Cade handed her a document Judge Harrison had provided. "This is the deed to your original ranch. The seizure has been declared illegal, and the property is being returned to you, to us technically, since we're married. But Eliza, it's yours if you want it." Eliza stared at the paper, at the familiar property description, at the promise of reclaiming what had been stolen. Her first instinct was pure joy. They could go back, rebuild, give the children their father's legacy. Then reality intruded. The ranch was 60 miles from Cade's property. Returning there meant leaving him, dissolving this strange marriage of convenience, splitting apart the family they'd accidentally created. "I don't want it," she heard herself say. Cade's expression flickered. "Eliza, that's your home. Your husband's dream. You can't just—" "It was William's dream. It was our home. Past tense." Eliza looked at Cade directly. "But the children have made new memories now. They call your ranch home. They call you Pa. And She took a shaky breath. "I don't want to go back to what was. I want to move forward with what is." "What is?" Cade's voice was carefully neutral, but hope flickered in his eyes. "A real marriage, if you'll have me. Not just legal protection or practical arrangement, but actual partnership, actual family, actual—" She couldn't quite say the word love, not yet, but she could offer its shadow. "Actual choice to be together because we want to be, not because we have to be." Cade crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands cupping her face with heartbreaking gentleness. "Eliza, are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to careful distance. I'm already more than half in love with you, and if you give me permission to fall the rest of the way, I will, completely, irrevocably, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you and those children." "You're already worthy." Eliza's hands covered his, holding them against her face. "You've been worthy since the moment you looked at my desperate, starving family and said you wanted all of us. So yes, I'm sure. Terrified, but sure." Cade kissed her then, not the brief, chaste press of lips from their wedding, but something deeper, real, full of promise and possibility, and all the feelings they'd been carefully not naming. Eliza kissed him back, pouring 6 weeks of confusion and fear and growing affection into the gesture, and felt something broken inside her start to heal. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cade rested his forehead against hers. "So, Mrs. Mercer, what happens now?" "Now we go home." Eliza smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "We tell the children they're stuck with both of us permanently, and we figure out how to build a real life together." "I can do that." Cade's grin was boyish, joyful. "I'm very good at building things." The journey home felt different, lighter, full of conversation and laughter, and the easy comfort of 2 people who'd stopped fighting what they felt. They held hands on the wagon seat, kissed goodnight by the campfire, and talked about futures instead of just survival. Eliza told him about William without feeling guilty for moving on, and Cade spoke of Sarah with love but no longer with grief that eclipsed everything else. They were 2 people who'd been broken by loss, learning slowly how to be whole together. When they finally crested the rise that revealed the ranch, late afternoon sun painting everything gold, Eliza felt her heart swell. The children must have been watching for them because the door burst open and 9 bodies came pouring out, running, shouting, a chaotic mass of relief and joy. Cade pulled the wagon to a stop, and before Eliza could climb down, she was surrounded by children demanding to know everything at once. Daniel helped her from the wagon with new maturity. Rebecca was crying happy tears. The twins talked over each other in their excitement, and little Nora wrapped herself around Eliza's legs like she planned never to let go. "We missed you," Nora said, her small face pressed against Eliza's stomach. "The house was too quiet." "We missed you too, sweetheart." Eliza looked over the children's heads to where Cade stood, Evan on his shoulders and Timothy clinging to his leg, and felt something settle permanently in her chest. But we're home now, and we're not going anywhere again. Ever? Samuel asked hopefully. Ever, Cade confirmed, reaching out one hand to Eliza. She took it, let him pull her close so they stood together facing their children. In fact, your mama and I have something to tell you. We've decided that this marriage is going to be a real one, which means I'm not just Mr. Mercer anymore. I'm your father now, if you'll have me. For real, forever, not just on paper. The silence lasted approximately 3 seconds before chaos erupted. Happy chaos this time, children cheering and crying and talking all at once, the twins dancing in circles, Daniel clapping James on the back with brotherly joy, and Nora launching herself at Cade with enough force to nearly knock him over. "Does this mean you love Mama?" Rebecca asked with teenage directness. "Yes," Cade said simply, looking at Eliza. "Very much." "And Mama, do you love Pa?" Evan asked, using the name that had become natural over weeks. Eliza looked at Cade, at this good man who'd saved her family and somehow saved her too, and let herself say the words she'd been too afraid to speak. "Yes, I love him very much." The children erupted again, and this time when Cade pulled Eliza close and kissed her thoroughly in front of their entire audience, nobody pretended it was just practical. It was love, messy and complicated and built on foundations of shared survival and mutual respect and the slow, steady choosing of each other day after day. That night, after dinner and celebrations and finally getting the younger ones to bed, Eliza stood in the bedroom, their bedroom now, Cade having moved his things back in while she was seeing to Ruth, and marveled at how much had changed in just 3 months. "Nervous?" Cade appeared in the doorway, his expression gentle and slightly uncertain. "A little." Eliza turned to face him. "This is real now. No more separate rooms, no more careful distance. Are you sure you want all of this? 9 children, a wife with more baggage than sense, endless complications." "Stop." Cade crossed to her, taking her hands. "Eliza, I want every complication, every challenge, every sleepless night with a sick child, and every argument about ranch management and every moment of chaos those 9 beautiful kids can generate. Because it means I get you, I get this family. I get to wake up every morning with purpose and go to bed every night knowing I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. You're very sure of yourself." "I'm sure of us." Cade pulled her close, his arms solid around her. "Now, Mrs. Mercer, are you going to keep stalling, or are you going to let me show you exactly how much I love you?" Eliza laughed, feeling joy bubble up from somewhere deep and previously untouchable. "I suppose stalling would be rude at this point." "Extremely rude," Cade agreed, and kissed her until she forgot why she'd ever been afraid of this. Outside the window, the Wyoming prairie stretched vast and beautiful under a blanket of stars. Inside, the house that had been so lonely for so long was full of sleeping children and new love and the promise of mornings yet to come. Not perfect, perhaps. Real things never were, but real and chosen and built to last. In the morning, Nora would wake early and climb into their bed, chattering about her dreams. The twins would burn breakfast and laugh about it. Daniel would discuss ranch work with Cade like the partner he was becoming. Rebecca would organize everyone with her usual efficiency. And Eliza would stand in the center of it all, coffee in hand and her husband's arm around her waist, and know with absolute certainty that this noise and chaos and love was exactly what home was supposed to feel like. They'd survived the dust and hunger and loss. They'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate griefs. And now, together, they were building something new. Not replacing what had been lost, but creating something equally precious from the pieces that remained. A family. Messy, complicated, imperfect, and absolutely whole. Months later, when Rebecca asked her mother if she ever regretted leaving the road behind that day Cade found them, Eliza pulled her daughter close and smiled. "Not once," she said. "Because that road led us here, to him, to home. And sweetheart, this is exactly where we were always meant to be." And in the kitchen, overhearing, Cade looked at his wife, surrounded by their children, and understood exactly what Sarah had meant all those years ago. A home wasn't about the building. It was about the people inside it, the ones who chose each other, day after day, through hardship and joy and all the complicated beauty of actually living. He'd wanted all of them, And somehow, miraculously, he'd gotten exactly that.